Alright, hi, I'm John Rowland. I am going to teach you how to change a feed nut in an ST10 or LS10 or an HT10. And I've had this question from a few people. It seems a little daunting when you look at it first, and some people will end up taking more apart than they need to. But what I'm going to show you is how easy it is. This is important to know if you have one of these saws, because everybody will have to change your feed nut at some point in time. So this is the tools you need. You can use adjustable wrenches, and I'm going to show you step by step how to go through it. This is an 1/8 inch Allen wrench and a regular Phillips screwdriver. So number one is you unplug the saw. Number two is you unplug the motor from the saw. Now, when we go to take this box off, some people will tear this wire and bend it and stuff and try and take it off. And that's really the hard way to do it, because it's really hard to bend the wire back. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the chain off inside. It just slips out of the clip. And then I'm going to loosen this, this through bolt, which is pretty easy to get off. And it makes it a lot simpler to take the control box off rather than trying to tear the spring apart. Now the 4 screws that hold the control box on. I haven't had my coffee yet, so I'm functioning subpar. Guide that wire out. I set my 4 screws up there. Now the control box, you'll see you have the motor. Now when you pull on this, don't pull on the wires, you pull on the connectors. That way you don't rip a wire out, but it's really easy, and the whole control box comes off in one piece. So then we can set that aside, and now what we're looking at is we have our feed motor, and it's connected to the shaft. You'll notice there's 4 screws. You don't have to take all those screws off. You basically, and sometimes it's easier to put the wrench in this way, and then cheat and use my, a smaller wrench is nice if you have to do this. I have big hands, so it's a little harder for me to get in. And these screws, we like to have them really tight, because it's really inconvenient if one of them comes loose. Now this is kind of revealing how to change the feed motor too. Although if I was replacing the feed motor, I would take the other 2 sets of 2 screws loose. So now the motor's off. And now we have 2 collars inside. So I'm going to undo this collar, and I want to get it unscrewed enough that I can slide the collar on the shaft. Now usually there's a little tiny burr now you see that little trick I did is I used the carriage to help me push the collar back, because see, the collar will make a little tiny mark on the shaft, and it won't want to let go. Now I cheat and I slide this forward so I don't have to take that back collar off. It stays set. Now I can go in here, and if you look a little bit more, move the camera around. There's a set screw on the handle. I'm just going to undo that set screw, and then I can slide the handle off. Now my feed nut is free. I can slide my feed nut out, and you'll see there's a little spring that just hooks on there. and I'm not going to unhook this because I'm going to put it right back together, but you just unhook the spring from this little hole here and hook it back in the new feed nut, and then slide your feed nut back in the hole, and then the handle goes on. Now when you put the handle on, you'll notice here, I'll bring this up a little closer. So if you notice here, there's a flat on the feed nut. It's really important when you put it back together that you get that screw right in the middle of that flat. Otherwise your handle will try and come loose, which is an annoyance and an inconvenience, and shouldn't ever happen if it's assembled correctly. Now what I like to do is, when I'm putting these kind of things back together, is I'll wiggle the handle until I am certain that I'm centered down on that flat. This is where it's really nice if I've had my coffee, because alright, so now I'm on it in the center of the flat. I'm going to come over here and tighten it up a little bit. And now I can rotate it back. Now I don't go too crazy rotating it too hard, because you can overstretch the spring. And then you slide your feed screw back in and line it up with the hole in the back. If you look back in the very back here, you'll see I'm lining up with the hole, and I'm going to slide it all the way back until that collar sits down on it. Now I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to use the wrench because I got that little burr on that shaft. I'm holding with my thumb on the outside as I tap this up until I can hear it touching, and now I can adjust that set screw. Now sometimes it's easier. You can't do this if you have a ball end Allen wrench. You'll notice this Allen wrench here has got a flat end. They make ball end and flat end. If you're doing that kind of thing that I just showed you, you want to have a flat end. The ball end will strip, and you'll have a problem. Now I've got to double check, make sure I don't want the collar to be loose. Now I check my action. Now you'll notice here, look over on this side, these two bolts right here, I did not take those loose. If you take those loose, then your center line for your adjustment on your feed nut is off, and you'll have to kind of recenter it, clamp it on the shaft, and then slowly tighten those up so it's on center. You don't need to take those off. It's much faster if you just do what I did, where you just simply take the set screw out here and slide the whole thing out, because that's already centered, comes centered from the factory. Now if you have an older saw, you will want to center it. You'll put your feed nut in, and clamp it on the shaft, and then slowly tighten those up, and what it does is it pulls it into center. So now I'm going to show you a little trick here. If those set screws here are in a weird place, you can just spin the motor and turn it so it's easier to get an Allen wrench on it. Now here we're going to do the exact same thing. I've got this shaft. Now let's see, I want to get my shaft. Now you'll notice I got the flat on my shaft. I'm going to center one of the set screws right on top of it. So I'm going to use this set screw to make sure I'm right on the shaft. Now when I put this in, I don't want the collar rubbing on the front of the tank. So as soon as I get down to being real close to tight, I'm going to adjust that distance so it's close, but it's not rubbing. All right, I got about a 32nd of an inch. That's all you need. It's not gonna try and come loose or rub, because it doesn't. There's not much slop in it. You see, when I moved that, when I rotated the shaft around, so my collars are a little easy, or my set screws are a little easier to access. It's just a little bit more convenient. I like to double check these because it only takes a second, and it saves me having to take it apart later if I I got distracted or the phone rang or something and I missed a screw, and then it comes loose. So now I like to set my motor up in position. Now I'm going to bring my control box back, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook the wires up for the motor. So I'm going to get this guy in, and this clip here in the center, there's a slot in the middle, and then a tongue. You got to make sure the tongue is going into the slot, not going beside it. If it's going beside it, you may get an intermittent feed motor because it doesn't make good contact. Now, I slide this up in here, and what I like to do, I'm not going to do it for you right in this moment, but I'll have my staff come back and do it. We put a little bit of the black let's see, ultra black, I think the silicone adhesive. We get it at AutoZone, but we put it a little bit on. You'll see it on the screws. Put a little bit on each screw. But I don't have a tube here handy with me, so for the purpose of our example, I'm just gonna put it back together, and then I'll tell them to go back and glue my screws for me with fresh, since I took it apart. And don't go crazy when you tighten those. If you over tighten them, then you can strip the threads out, and that's really inconvenient. Doesn't take much to hold it on. Now